Hey guys, welcome back to another 3D printing video. And in this video, we're going to be taking a look at the SaintSmart Core XY 3D printer. So it's called the Coreception 300, and I am pretty excited to see how this printer does. So in this video, we're going to unbox it, set it up, and do some prints. All right, so let's get started. Alright, so the printer comes in this box, and it does say Core XY 3D printer, power to the makers. And on this side here we can see the weight, 21 kilograms. That is quite heavy, and the size looks like of the box, which is quite large. So here we are on the top, and I got a little calibration cube so you guys can see how large the box is. So let's go ahead and open it up. Now I'm not sure if SaintSmart ever made a printer, or this is their first one, but I know they do sell filaments. So right on top we can see they're using the white soft foam, thin layer, and looks like another thin layer, so 2 layers. And this is what greets us. So looks like we have some documentation, the manual, a bag of all our tools and other accessories. Well, here's something interesting, a remote control, looks like to some kind of lighting. Well, that's pretty cool. So here we have 4 of these boxes. Okay, so these are bearings, and they do say Japan technology on them. Very interesting. All right, so it looks like here we have the extruder assembly, and it does look like we have a Titan extruder, some filament, and it is on a roll, so that's really nice to see. And it looks like it's white PLA. All right, more foam, and it looks like this thing is definitely packed well. And so here we can see the upper portion of the printer, and this is where the Core XY of the printer is. And we can see there's quite a bit of belts going around, and everything is pre-built, which is a big plus for this part, because adjusting all these belts and rollers to work just right sometimes can be really tedious. So I'm really glad to see that they pre-assembled this, because that makes it a lot easier for anyone that buys the printer to get started. And we can see on each end here we have a strip of LEDs, and I'm guessing that remote we saw earlier controls these. So we're going to take a closer look at all the details a little later in the video. So we're done with this layer, and here we can see the heated build platform, and it is insulated, so that's a plus. Looks like our wiring is strain relieved, and we do have a glass build surface, and it does look like that ultra base style with the little dimples. So there's a little plastic cover that's protecting it, and we'll take that off right at the end. But yeah, the bed is quite large. You can see my hand, and it is just a thin piece of aluminum, and they can get away with any kind of small imperfection on something like this because they are using glass. So even though this is a large size, we should have no issues with uniformity with the bed. All right, more foam. And so this looks like our base, and it's very large. This is probably where all the weight is, most of it. Yeah, it is quite a big guy. So yeah, this is a huge base, guys. And we got some wires coming out of it. Yeah, overall, this printer looks like it's all pre-built. It just looks like we need to assemble the main frame and then just put it all together and plug it in. Below the base we have even more pieces. So here's a bag of, looks like accessories to different parts of the printer. Now even though this printer is somewhat pre-built, we do still have to assemble quite a few things. So these are 2 lead screws. They're protected. And then we got the side channels, and they are in this blue color, so that's interesting. Definitely looks quite unique. It's kind of got like a little purple hue to it. The solid rods that the Z-axis will travel on, and looks like a few frame pieces. And that's everything for the box. All right guys, so what you're looking at is the bottom of the base. I got it flipped around, and we do have rubber feet here, 4 of them on each corner, and there's a couple venting holes. So what I want to do is go ahead and take off this plate so we can see what's inside. And we are going to need some tools, so I'm going to go ahead and pull the wrenches out. And we do get a nice set of Allen wrenches, and they do have the little ball point at the end, and a couple open-ended wrenches. So there's 2 bolts on each side, total of 8. And this is what it looks like inside. So it's mostly empty right here in the middle. All the parts are on the edges. So let's take a closer look. So this is the back, and this is the front, and these are the sides. And we can see there's a stepper motor on each side, and that's going to be for the Z-axis. And also our power plug comes in from the side and the back, and all the wires look nicely organized and tucked. So we do have a relay switch right here, and I think this circuit is for the power button up front. Here we have a power supply, 360 watts, 24 volts. Now the connections look nice and crimped. A connector plug that connects on the other end. And as we go to the front here, we can see we have the main board. And this is the MakerBase Nano version 1.2. So it does look like it has a 32-bit ARM processor. And also we do have removable stepper drivers, and they are synced. And these 2 white ones here look like they are TMC2208, I guess, or the silent steppers. And there is a pretty large fan here that blows on the heat sinks. So we do have a ribbon cable that comes out of the board and goes to the display, which is also a MakerBase. All right, well, hopefully that was useful to somebody. I'm going to put the lid back on and we'll start assembling. All right, so let's see what kind of paperwork we get. Selecting the correct voltage, which we definitely need to check. We also get this little envelope here with a card in it that says thank you. Very cool. So for the important part, our manual. So it is a pretty nice manual. It does have nice pictures. These are all our parts, and then our smaller hardware. And here we have step 1. And there's not too many steps, looks like 7 in total. All right, so for step 1, we need all these parts here. So our channels are wrapped in a plastic, and we got 2 2020s. And then we got 4 more 2020s that are longer, and these are going to be our 4 sides. And then the shorter ones go on the top. So here we have a bag of all the hardware. There's quite a bit of it. It looks like some kind of bracket. A spool holder, our knobs to the bed, 2 Z-Rod couplers, brass anti-backlash hardware here. And here we have a packet of bolts, and they are all labeled, which is great because in the manual here it shows you that you'll need 4 of the M25s and 4 of the M510s. Kind of like how they made this into one package where they all stay together and they're all labeled. So according to the manual, we're going to be building from this side like this, with our front facing to the right. So on these longer 2020 channels, we have a little hole up here, and that's going to go to the top. As we can see in the manual, there's another brace that goes here. And if you look at this hole, you can see that one side is actually wallowed out on the channel, and that part is going to go out because this is where the bolt goes through. The wallowed out part is going to face the outside of the printer. So let's just start with this corner here. So one thing to keep in mind are these wires. Make sure you don't pinch them. But yeah, we're simply just going to set it down just like that. And the smaller M510 bolts will go underneath. So the best way to probably do this is set the corner over the edge of your table where you can get to the bottom of it. And I'm not going to snug this up yet, just going to barely tighten it. That way after I build the whole frame, if it does need a little play back and forth, it can. And we'll come back to this and tighten them up all the way. So yeah, we're going to do the same thing on all the corners. And don't forget that you need the wallowed out part this way because we will have a channel that runs through here in between. All right, so the 4 vertical pieces are up. Now again, you want the wallowed out parts to the outside on all of these. And also another thing to note is that you want to be really careful when you put these channels in not to pinch a wire, because there's wires coming out from all ends. So looking at the printer like this, our next channels are a little bit tricky because if you look at them, from this bolt to that end is a little bit longer than from this bolt to that end. So the shorter end will go this way and the longer end will go that way. So just like this with the holes pointing up. And then we're going to take the black bolts, the longer ones. I'm going to put it through the channel. And same thing from this end. So yeah, we're going to do exactly the same thing for the other side. The 2 closer holes will go to the back of the printer. All right, so that's what that should look like. So now we go to step 2, and that's going to be assembling the bearings into this frame. So this is what the frame pieces look like, and they are shrink wrapped. So we got 2 pieces that look exactly the same. So we're going to do the same thing on both of them. So we're going to need these bushings, and then 16 of the M4x8 bolts, and these bearings here. And watch out, these could be a bit greasy. This is why they're in a bag. I do have some fabric gloves. I think I'll wear this. They're not super greasy, but you're definitely going to get some grease on your hands. But yeah, it's pretty simple. This bearing here will just go down into the hole, and the bolts will line up. Now it doesn't really matter which side you do because you can just twist them around the right orientation. Grab our little bolts and start them into the bearing. So this is definitely a little time consuming because there's a lot of little parts to put together. And that's how it goes. You can go ahead and tighten this all the way because there's practically no play in this. It's machined very well. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten this up. And then we're going to do the same thing on this side. And now we're going to install the brass. Now all you need is the larger piece with the bolts, the backlash parts with the spring and this other piece. We'll put it away for now until we get to the lead screws. So yeah, same thing here. This is just going to go in like that. And the 4 provided bolts that were in the bag. All right, and so we are done with this piece. So we're going to do exactly the same thing to this other one. And that's what the pieces look like once they're built. Now for step 3, we're going to put it all together onto the printer. So we're going to need these 2 other pieces. So these are support brackets for the top. And so the way it's all going to go together, the rods are going to go through these bearings. Let's go ahead and set them through. And the other one. So just like that. Then we're going to set it into the base on this bracket here. So there's a bracket that accommodates the rods. That simply just sits in just like that. And if we go to the top, we can see that the rods are just in the air, and this is where this bracket comes in. And there are 2 of them for each end. And if you look at it, there's some drilled holes and there's wallowed out areas. The other side is not. So that's going to go up. So just like that, it's going to go right on top of here. And then these rods will go through here. So we are going to need some M520 bolts. So there's 6 of them, and 3 of them will go on each side. And so we can go ahead and tighten this up really good. Now before installing this whole bracket, I realized that we probably should have installed coupler in first. And if we look at the coupler, there's a smaller end and a larger end. The larger end will go up. That's where the lead screw will go into. If we look right here, we can see there's a shaft, and we're going to find the flat spot on the shaft. And what we're going to do is we're going to line up one of these set screws to the flat part. If we look inside, we can see that there's a little stopper for the Z-rod. You don't want to really go past that. And that's about 2/3 of the way down from the top. So yeah, we're going to tighten up one of these set screws and also the other one. And we can go ahead and tighten this up really good. And that looks good right there. So you might want to go ahead and do that before you install this whole piece here, because it'll try to be in the way. All right guys, so for the next part, we're going to be installing the lead screw. And this is also very greasy, so I guess I'll put on my gloves. And so technically you don't have to touch the lead screw. You can just hold it by the protector on the outside. All we're going to do is just going to feed it through the top here, through this idler bearing, and it's going to go down, and we're going to thread it into the brass coupler. But before we continue anymore, we need to install the backlash system here. What we need to do is we need to unscrew the lead all the way out, and then we're going to literally just push this thing on there, and you can see there's these 2 tabs. They're going to line up with these here, and we're literally just going to compress them together. And the spring is kind of like in the middle of all. So yeah, you're just compressing them together, then we're going to run the lead screw through that. And the lead screw is going to hold it all together. Could be a little tricky, but it's not too bad. And now we can go ahead and go into the coupler. And so what we're going to do, we're going to raise it off the bottom just a little bit, maybe like a 1/4 inch or something, and tighten it right there. And that should be good to go. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and do the other side the same way, and then we'll go to the next step. All right, so we are also needing to install 2 end stop switches here on each side of the frame, looking at the back. So this is the back and this is the front of the printer. And what they're going to do is they're going to point down like this and mount on the channel with these T-nuts, and just like that. It should click right here on that switch. Sure enough, it does. Perfectly right there. And so we're going to do the same thing on this side, point it down. So try to install these as even as possible, or the same way. They do adjust up and down. And because there's 2 of them, both for the Z-axes, we might have to adjust them accordingly to make sure it holds really flat, because we don't want it to travel on an angle up or down. But if you install these 2 together the same, that should be close enough. All right, so for the next part, we're going to install the whole top assembly. And so this is the front of the printer and this is the back. According to the manual, the motors will go to the back. And this is how it sits, right on the top. And we do have our 4 last M514 bolts that will go through the top into the rails on each corner. So I'm just going to start it. I'm not going to tighten it too much yet. I'm going to go ahead and install the rest of them. And if you guys remember, we haven't tightened all our frame bolts up. And the reason we haven't is because we wanted everything to kind of flex a bit and move in the right position as we build it. All right, so I got all the 4 bolts in, and I'm going to go ahead and tighten them really good on every corner. And I'm going to go back and tighten these also, because they're not tight all the way. And also going to go down here and tighten the 4 bolts underneath that we didn't tighten all the way either. So also in step 5, we need to install the extruder. And the extruder actually goes right on top of the hot end assembly, right here on the top. And it mounts on these 2 little threads. So here we have the extruder, and it does look like a geared Titan style. And it simply sits right over on this bracket here, just like that. Now I think they want us to put this other end of the PTFE tubing from the hot end into the extruder. So let's go ahead and try to do that. I don't know if it's the right length, but it looks like it might be. Yeah, it is. It's perfect actually. So yeah, I don't know if you guys saw that, but the PTFE tubing will literally go straight into there, and just like that. And in the bag, there's 2 little bolts, and they go right here, and that's what's going to hold the extruder down. Go ahead and tighten that up, and that's good right there. So that's pretty unique. I've never seen a design like this. It still rides with the hot end, and so our PTFE tubing is really short. Pretty interesting for sure. But I am kind of curious of how the filament's going to feed on the top here. So that was step 5. Next step is 6, and that's going to be installing the heated bed to the frame. And that's actually quite simple. We're going to need our baggie of the parts, which we have these really nice large knobs with a brass insert. And we also do get the nicer quality springs. So there's 4 of everything. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to mount this bed to the frame here on the 4 holes, with your cord going to the back. We're going to grab the long bolt and go through the top, and then take our spring and go through that on the bottom side. And then we're going to go through the hole through the frame, and at the bottom of that we'll start our knob. And this is how we're going to do all 4 corners. So yeah, once we do the front, all we got to do is just lift the back, put the bolts through there, put our springs underneath that, line it up, and then put the knobs on the bottom. And by the way, on the knob, the little nub goes up like this. So this is the bottom and this is the top. So once we get everything on, we want to go ahead and compress the springs about halfway. And the reason you want to do this is because you want to adjust up and down from there. That's usually my starting point, and it works out pretty good. So also in step 6, we need to install our spool holder, and that goes right here somewhere. Now for some reason I have a feeling it needs to go higher, but let's just install it here and we'll adjust it as we need it. And that's step 6. So step 7 is plugging everything in, and we're basically done. So this shouldn't be too hard because everything is labeled. So from the right front corner, we have this pretty interesting, looks like VGA cable, and that's going to go up here, the connector for the hot end assembly. So that's pretty interesting to see this kind of connector. I've never seen one like this. It's definitely a good type for this use case. So yeah, we're just going to plug it in, and then we're going to tighten it by spinning these little knobs, and that's going to lock it in. And that's it. And then we do have another plug that comes right under here, and that's the motor plug for our extruder. So now we're flipped around and looking at the back of the printer. So here we have our heated bed cable, and that'll plug in right here. And there's a little slot that you line up and then lock it in with the ring. So here we have some more cables coming out, and you guys can see they're all labeled. We got a Y, a Z, and an X. So our Z is for the Z axis switch, which is right here. And then our X axis switch is up here. And then we have our X-axis motor plug, which is on the other side right here. There's even a label here, it says X motor. Now there is another cable that comes out from the bottom, and that's actually part of our LED strip, and there's a plug just hanging there, and we're gonna connect that. Same thing on this side. We got our LED strip, and then we got our Z-axis switch and the Y-axis motor. So the Z switch is here, and the motor right here. And believe it or not, that is all our wiring. Now there is one more wire, which is right here, and it does say filament detector on it, which is this guy here, and it does come with 2 bolts and some T-nuts to mount it somewhere. Now the only thing is, it's kind of strange how it's all set up right now. If I mount the filament here, I can feed it through the spool and then out, but there's no tube or anything that goes from the filament to the extruder. So I have a feeling that this is going to be a problem, and I think the filament detector, if you wanted to use it, and you probably should for this large print size here, you probably come in use, is that it might be better off just free floating it, meaning plug it in and then run the filament through and just kind of let it feed and drop on its own as it's feeding through. So at least that's what I'm thinking right off the bat, but we're gonna see once we get it all hooked up and started. And to be honest, I think the spool holder here is not the best place, and we might have to do something else. So now that we assembled the whole printer, we can go ahead and put this build surface on and take off the plastic film. And this is the reason why you want to do this last, because you don't want to get textured here, greasy or scratched as you're putting it together. Now, I haven't seen any kind of clips or anything to clip this thing together, so they must be in this bag still. So let's go ahead and check out what else is included. So we do get a spatula, and you probably don't want to use this on this bed because that'll mess it up real quick. We also get some pretty nice cutters. Our power cable, a USB cord to connect from the printer to the computer, but it is kind of short. Looks like some extra parts, like a nozzle, a clean out needle, some PTFE tubing, some bolts and nuts, and some zip ties. And we'll probably end up using the zip ties to clean up these wires. And there is a micro SD card that's 8 gig with an adapter to USB. And last but not least, here are the clips. And there are 4 of them, and they're quite simple to use. We're just gonna fold them over, and we're gonna bite the glass bed to the aluminum. So that should be good right there. So let's take a closer look at this thing. Now right off the bat, it is a very large footprint, not only down on the base, but also in height. So keep that in mind that you will need room. So overall, the construction of the whole printer seems robust and rigid. It has no flex in the frame, and I think what helps it is the solid piece of metal on the top that keeps it from warping in any way. So as we saw earlier, we have the extruder and the hot end together, and everything rides on the linear rails, the x-axis, and also the y-axis on both sides. Now our z-axis travels on these rods, and because there's 2 on each side, it's very solid. So this is a great design as far as rigidity goes. Now the great thing about this printer is that since the Core XY part has been pre-assembled, this makes it convenient and quick to get started. If you had to assemble all these belts, you could get a little frustrated, and it could be time consuming because lining all the belts up with all the pulleys does get tricky sometimes. And speaking about belts and pulleys, this is a Core XY printer, and so we got the 2 motors, X and Y, working together. So if I move the hot end diagonally like this, only one motor turns. That one doesn't do anything. But if I move it straight back, then both of them turn. So the motors work together to make the movements. So looking at the hot end from the bottom, we do have a silicone sock, and there's 2 parts cooling fans on each side. And on the other side, we have a large heat break fan. So our PTF tubing goes straight into the extruder, and that's pretty unique. And we do have a Titan style geared extruder. So one of the limitations to this design is that because the extruder is riding with the hot end, we do get a little bit more weight here. So technically our advantage in higher speeds could be somewhat compromised with the weight. So everything that can be metal is metal on this printer, which is really nice. I went ahead here in the back and tucked in the wires inside the channels, so it has a really nice clean look. So we do have a pretty large printing surface of 300 by 300 by 330 tall, and we do have a glass print surface with the ultra base style coat that when it warms up, it grabs the filament, and as it cools off, it should pop right off. So we'll see how good that works. And obviously it is removable with these clips. At the back of the heated bed, we do have strain relief, and also our heated bed is insulated. So that's a huge plus for this size, especially with the glass. And also we get nice springs and large turning knobs for adjusting the bed. And at the base of the printer, we can see we have the adjustment for the voltage, and mine is set to 230. So I need to go ahead and change that to 115. So make sure you check that before you power on the printer. So we do have a pretty simple spool holder here on the right side, and we'll have to figure that out still with our filament detector. Looking to the front of the printer, we have our touch screen with the protector over it, so let's go ahead and remove that. That came off pretty easy. And we got a power button to the right and a SainSmart logo on the other side. To the right side of the printer, this is where our micro SD card will slot in. And we got a USB connection to connect from the printer to the computer. And to the left side, here in the back, we have a power switch and a power plug that's fused. And the printer does have 4 rubber feet, and also has this really nice blue accent colors on the frame. So it does give it a more special look. And again guys, this thing is quite large, so keep that in mind that you will need room for it. So for the next part, let's go ahead and power it on. I got the plug plugged in, so I'm gonna hit the power button. And nothing happens because we have a secondary power button right here next to the display. So let's go ahead and click that. And there it goes. So we got a green light glowing on the button. Looks like it's booting up. And we have the home screen. So let's go ahead and home it and make sure all the axes work. So I'm going to click on home and then all. Okay, so it looks like the X, the Y, and now the Z bed coming up. And right off the bat guys, I really love how thin this chin is up front, where we can really see easily from the front here to the bed, because a lot of our stuff is going to be happening right here in the beginning. As it prints, it goes down. So we really have a good space to look through all around the printer, actually on all sides, to see how our print's doing. So that's a plus already. So let's go down here to our UI, and you guys can see the hot buttons here. So this is our home screen. So we have a preheat. Now let's go ahead and preheat the system. Now I don't see a shortcut for, let's say, PLA. I guess we'll have to do that individually. Okay, that's kind of interesting. That touchscreen is very responsive. So now if we hit this extrusion button, we go to the hotbed. So let's go to 60. So here we have move. We can move the individual axes. Then our home, which I clicked earlier. Printing is going to read the SD card. This is our extruder controls. Then our leveling button, which we'll use in a second. Settings. So here we can change the language. These are all the different languages it has, which is nice to see. Fan controls. About the printer. Looks like filament loading, unloading. And continue printing. And then we have a shutdown, so we can shut it down without pushing that power button on the side. Now I'm not sure if that turns everything off, so let's go ahead and try it. Okay, so everything seems to be turned off. Now we'll power back on right here. Alright, so let's go to leveling, and here we can see we have 4 points and then the center of all the corners of the bed. Alright, so for this process you're going to need a sheet of paper of some sort. I'm just going to use this included paper about the voltage. Now the most important part before you push any of the points to level, make sure your bed is low enough where the nozzle is not going to scratch it. So I'm going to go down just a little more just in case. I can see that it's okay, but so I'm going to go ahead and hit 0.1. Okay, so it does go down, so that's good. Alright, so I guess 0.1 is over there. So yeah, now we're just going to grab our paper and we're going to level the first corner. So it looks like we're already pretty close there. So I'm going to make it a little loose and go to corner 2, which is going to be over there, looks like. Okay, so that was actually a little tight already, and they're almost perfect. Let's go to corner 3. That was almost perfect too. Interesting. I had it pretty close already right off the bat. Corner 4 is over here. And this one was loose. So yeah, basically I'm going to go around in a circle, and I'm not going to go to corner 5 yet until I'm happy with all my other corners. So I'm going to go back to 1 and just keep going around at least 2 or 3 more times, maybe even more if I want to, make sure I got it just right. Because when you move one corner, the other change. So you want to go at least 3 or 4 times to get it right. And by the way, we are preheated, so the bed is warm and the nozzle is hot. Alright, so I went around at least 5 times, so let's go ahead and now check the middle. And the reason it took me a while is because this bed is large, as every little change on each corner changes the other one quick. Alright, so it looks like the middle is pretty much perfect too. Look at that. So if you do need to go up or down a little bit on the middle, you can turn each knob just a little bit, the same amount, and that'll raise the whole thing up or down, depending on where you need to go. So yeah, it looks like our level is good. So our nozzle and our heat bed is hot. Let's go ahead and load some filament. Start with this white PLA that was included. So right off the bat, I don't like where the spool holder is, so let's go ahead and move it up. So I'm just gonna move it all the way up for now, and let's see how that works out. The thing is that we have to go from the spool into the extruder, and there's nothing in between it. So this is kind of a little bit of a strange situation. So let's cut our filament on an angle, and we'll put it on right here. Now you probably guys can see what the issue is. Feeding this to the extruder is kind of an awkward position here. Now I guess this could work, it just doesn't seem very natural, I guess. And also if we wanted to use our filament detector, which by the way does have an arrow showing you which way your filament should flow, let's just go ahead and use it, and we can see there's a little light that comes on when we poke it through. So yeah, I'm not too sure how to work with this at the moment, but we're just gonna go with this and see how it works out. I don't really like this idea, but I think it's maybe okay. Now on the extruder here, it's a pretty simple process. We're just gonna pull on this arm and then feed our filament through, and it's gonna go all the way down into the hot end. And here we have a little adjuster on how tight the arm here pushes on the gear to feed it. So if you have slippage, you might want to tighten this up so you can push a little harder. But yeah, simple as that. We're ready to go, and we'll see how this goes. So let's go ahead and grab our micro SD card, and it does come with this little adapter that you plug it in here, and then you can read it into your computer. And it plugs in right here on the side, upside down. So let's see what we have on the card. We're going to click on this green printing button. So it looks like we have a few files. Let's click on models, and we do have a couple G-codes, a NIC and a rabbit. So I guess let's start with the NIC. So it's going to ask us if we want to print. We're going to confirm, and it starts up. I'll grab that booger right quick. Alright, so it looks like it's starting up. Well, let's hope our level is going to be good. And there it goes. I just realized you guys can't see. But it did start, and it looks like we are a really good distance from the build platform. So maybe we can get a little closer. It does look like that, but I'm just gonna leave it. It looks fine. So I think what it's printing is the dog. I think this is what the Nick print is, if I'm remembering correctly. So right off the bat, guys, the printer itself is quite quiet. The stepper motors are definitely silent, at least the two in the corner. Now you can hear the extruder a little bit, and there's really almost no fan noise either, just a subtle sound. So overall, this printer is quite quiet. So I'm gonna bring the microphone in so you guys can hear. Yeah, well, that's quite impressive and very refreshing to have a quiet printer. So let's check out what we can see while the printer is printing. So on the top here we have the file name, the percentage bar that's completed, the time that has passed, which is 6 minutes. The z-axis is at 0.6, the hot end and the bed temperatures, the fan speed, and on the bottom we have pause, stop, and options. If we click on options, we can adjust the temperature of the hot bed and a nozzle. We can control our fan speed. We can load and unload filament. Okay, once I click that, the printer actually stopped. I guess we need to click resume now. Yeah, there it goes. It's going back to printing. So if you click filament, it's going to pause and think you want to change the filament. Here we have the speed, and you can change between the movement, so how fast the printer's printing, and then the extrusion rate, so if you wanted to extrude a little more or less. And then here we also have the power option between manual and auto. So if we go to auto, the printer should turn off after it's finished printing. And that's the whole menu. So quite simple and very nice. And I definitely love the layouts. Intuitive, and it looks really nice with the dark background. Also guys, let's not forget that we got this remote that controls our lighting on the printer. So we need to remove the little plastic tab so the battery can contact inside. So let's go ahead and hit this power button, see what happens. Okay, look at that. Wow, well that's cool. So we have quite a few options here on the remote. We got mode, speed, demo, color, brightness. Looks like a lot of controls. Let's click on demo, see what that is. All right. Okay, so this is kind of like a party light, I guess now. That could be fun. Let's go to mode. Okay, so mode is different types of lightings. Very interesting. This definitely makes the printer a little bit more fun, I guess. Okay, so there's a bunch of modes between different colors and all kinds of stuff. So how do I get to a solid color? I guess if I click on the color, it just becomes solid. Okay, yeah, there's these hot buttons for colors. Well, white looks pretty nice. It's actually more bluey than white. So we got red, green, which green turns blue for some reason, and blue is green. These are backwards. Yellow is purple, blue. Okay, so for some reason, some of these buttons are backwards. In any case, we do also have brightness, so we can go down on the brightness. So if you don't want it bright, just very subtle. So that's pretty cool. I like how you can adjust the brightness. All right, so the doggy's moving along. Everything looks fine. So I'm just gonna let it print out and we'll see what comes out. So I went ahead and printed both of the files that were included on the SD card. And so this is Nick the dog, and he turned out really, really well. Now it's kind of hard to see on white filament, but overall it's looking really nice. I'm actually quite impressed. And just by judging it right off the bat, I got really high hopes for this printer now. So our bottom wasn't perfect, but still pretty good. But yeah, the layers are sitting really nice. I do see a little bit of vibrations in the print. So yeah, very happy with the start of this print. Now I went ahead and printed this rabbit, and I haven't pulled it off the bed. And by the way, the bed works really well. And that was so easy. So yeah, it seems to stick pretty good, and then it pops right off. Now the rabbit did have a little bit of issues, so you can see here under extrusion, and that is because of the filament detector. I think it was starting to jam. So after I noticed that it was having issues, I kind of monitored and helped the filament come out so we can finish this print. And you can see after that we had no issues whatsoever. But yeah, if we look at the rabbit's face, again on white, it's hard to see. Very impressive. I definitely want to see this in darker colors so we can see a little better how the layers are sitting. What I need to do is slice my own models, like a calibration cube, a benchy, and a few other things, and we'll see how it does. But I think I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this filament detector because it doesn't seem to work out well here, or at least in this configuration that I have. Alright, so I printed a calibration cube and a benchy. Let's take a closer look at the cube. Now, because this is a Core XY printer, doing even surfaces could be a little harder for it, and we can see that on the edges also. Right off the bat, the thing that stands out is some layering here, and it looks like inconsistencies of some sort, like in the extruder or something, or maybe layer heights, but you can kind of see in certain angles, like right here, some layering, and you can feel it. But as far as vibrations, we can see it's quite minimum and very, very minor to no ghosting. So this is our Y wall and our X wall. So bottom looks great and top is good too. So overall pretty good, but not great, I would say. That's going to take us to the Benchy, which also had the same kind of trouble. You can see the layering, which is very strange. And there's a little bit under extrusion here. Now I did remove the filament detector and ran some filament through it and just let it lay around. So technically we weren't hanging up on that, but it looks like maybe we still do have some kind of issue or hang-ups of the filament. But yeah, as we go up higher here, you can see that the print gets a little better. And we do have a slot on the box, but it's not perfect either. It's kind of melted on one side and more open on the other. So this being a Core XY printer, this is one of the main issues that it has. It's not able to do perfect circles, but to be honest, the circle on the chimney looks pretty much perfect. So a little bit off to a rocky start, but we are printing and we got decent cooling, and the bed is holding the prints pretty well so far. So I'm going to try to see if I can figure out what's going on with this layering. Alright, so I've printed a few more models, and let's go with this silver frog first. So I printed this frog in higher temperature thinking maybe that will help me, but it looks like it made it even worse, and we can see all this under extrusion here throughout his body. Also, one of his foot didn't really hold on to the bed, but we can see that we do have some trouble here under extrusion. Now, the way the layers are sitting, they're actually really nice. The parts that are good are really good. But we still do have layering and just a weird under extrusion. So that got me really curious of what was happening. So I started to try a few things, and I removed this little guide right on top of the extruder where the filament goes in. And after that, it seems like the under extrusion went away. And that's when I printed this little frog. So we still have layering, but the under extrusion's gone, which is interesting. So you can kind of see the layers on the back. This filament's a little hard to tell, but so there is still some layering, but we finally have more solid printing with no issues there. And so after that, I printed the bearing that I usually do for testing how well the tolerance are. And this printer did not do very well here and failed completely, and I cannot churn this, even putting a wrench through here and trying to churn it. It just will not break loose. It had a very severe layer shift, you guys can see. And I think that's what probably melted the gears together. So again, there's some kind of issue going on, and I can't seem to really put my thumb on it. I'm starting to think that maybe it's the bed or the lead screws. Something's binding somewhere because I'm getting very erratic layer shifts. So as I'm printing and trying to figure out what's going on, I went ahead and took out these anti-lash screw couplings off with the spring, because what I noticed is that as the bed's going down, it sometimes just jerks or falls in funny ways, which I thought was pretty weird. So maybe I'm having some binding in the lead screws. I do have plenty of grease on there. I checked that, and everything seems to be relatively smooth, but I can feel some resistance on the top. And also I did went through all of my couplers and the frame piece here to make sure nothing was off or binding, and everything seems good there. So for now, all I can do is just keep printing, because no matter what I try, it seems like it's not fixing my issue right away. Alright, so after quite a few prints later, I was successful to print quite a few things, and actually quite large things, as you can see. But unfortunately, I did not resolve completely what is happening here. Now what's interesting is when we first started with the dog and the rabbit, the filament laid down really well. Now on the rabbit, we started seeing the under extrusion here, and right off the bat, I thought it was the placement of the filament. And so I did use these filament holders to put the filament on top of the frame and feed it like that, but that didn't make any difference at all. So I realized that wasn't the case. Now I'm sure it helped, but didn't solve it completely. And so what did really make a huge difference is taking off this little adapter on the top of the extruder. So this just basically helps the extruder feed right into the area where you need to stick it through, right on the top. That way you're not fishing around in there more. And what I realized is that whenever a retraction was happening, this was binding here, and that was causing the filament to eventually be eaten up by the gear where it wasn't able to be pushed through. So after doing that, it seemed like I had much better luck, and I was able to print these frogs and this gear, but I still had those weird layer shifts. So after taking out the backlash springs, that seemed to help a little bit also. And basically all the prints you guys will see after that is just the best I was able to get this printer to print, and I played with temperatures and whatnot else. But overall, it's quite decent prints. And we can see here on the bottom. And by the way, guys, the bed was not as sticky as I thought it was going to be in the beginning. So I started having to use glue to make sure my print stuck, because if I didn't, they had a very high chance of falling off. Now, that might not be because of the bed. It could be because of this shifting of the layers that's causing the nozzle to run into the print and break it loose. The bed is not going down level. It's kind of hanging up in some areas as it's going down. But if we look at the astronaut overall, he turned out pretty good. So the layers are sitting reasonably well. The logo here looks pretty good. The cooling is reasonable. So overall a good print, but we can see a lot of layer shifting throughout the whole print. So yeah, this is how this turned out. Now we did print this huge screw here, and this took a very long time to print. I think about a day, 20 something hours. And this thing is huge. And what's interesting is the bottom here, let's see, didn't do all that great. There's some under extrusion. I'm not sure if you guys can tell, but there's definitely layer shifting. You can kind of see here in the reflection, the layer shifting. It's pretty severe. Leads me to believe that there's something wrong with the lead screws, or something's binding there in the Z-axis. But as we went up, things just got better and better, it seems like. And so we got a really nice uniform layers as we go up the print. And the top looks pretty good too. So I did have to use glue for this model also. You can kind of see the residue of it. And we did have a little lift here on one corner. But overall, the bed seems to work pretty well, but not as well as you would expect for this type of bed. So for the last print, I did the spaceship in spiralized mode. So the bottom stuck, but had to use glue again. Here we have really weird things going on. And again, on the bottom, it's the worst, seems like. So there's a pretty major layer shift, I think, is what happened. A little under extrusion here for some reason. But as we go up, you can see it gets better. And if we look at the walls, they actually look really nice. It just needs to be adjusted correctly for whatever is going on here. So this is a transition filament, so you can see kind of the transitions. So some of these layers that you see in color, they're not the printer, it's just the filament changing color. If we look at the reflections, that's where we can see how the print layers are really sitting. So not bad at all, actually very nice here around the logo. And you can see there's not too much ghosting and vibration, but there is some. And as we go up here, we can really see how nice the layers sit. But we did have issues here of some melting. But surprisingly, it finished this whole top with the ball, which is really hard to do because this stuff is really thin and usually melts going up. Now at the same time, I don't know if you guys can see, there are layer shifts throughout the top portion. Kind of hard to see, but yeah, they're all in the print. But the cool part is we can see that the ball actually printed, and that's pretty awesome that it was able to print that. So yeah, as you can see, the printer itself has quite a bit of potential in being an awesome printer, but I am having this issue. So, and I know from other reviews that this wasn't the case. So I'd have to say it's probably just isolated here to my printer. So overall, the printer is built very well and put together very nice with very good materials, metal being mostly everything. Assembling it from the box was not hard. We got great features like the touch screen, and the UI is great. The power button here, and by the way, it does auto shut off. You can set it up when finished printing, it'll just turn off, which is really nice. We got insulation on the heated bed. Now the glass is nice, but the top surface doesn't seem to stick as good as I want. This being a Core XY printer, you can print much faster than your typical printer and still get great results. And one of the things that they got right on this printer that's very underappreciated is that because it has dual axes lead screws, it has 2 limit switches on top, which brings each side exactly to the same point on the top. And that's quite important because you never have to worry about how off your bed is. Let's say if it was, off like this, if you bring it to the top, home it, it's gonna home it level every time and start off level. So there's no worrying about how close your bed is and if it's perfectly leveled. That's a great feature there. And obviously having color changings on the top could be kind of fun too if you wanted to play with that. So this is kind of cool to have, and I guess some people can appreciate it and some probably don't really care about this option. So with that said, I feel like there's a few things that they could have done better, like this filament detection and where the spool holder is and how it feeds into the extruder. And if it wasn't for this layer issue that I'm having, I would really highly recommend this for any Core XYs because this is one of the best ones I've seen in a while. Not only is it quite easy to get started right out of the box, all the components are high quality and everything that you would want in a Core XY. From the way the frame's built, the dual Z axes, and even linear rails for X and Y, very precise. So if you're really interested in this printer, I think it would be a good choice, but I'll definitely recommend reading other people's reviews and checking out other videos here on YouTube to see what other people are saying about it, because I'm pretty sure I'm isolated with this layer problem. But in any case, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. It maybe wasn't the best view of this printer, printer, but this is the prints that I got of it with the time that I had with it. So if you enjoyed it and you appreciate the effort, then hit that like button. If you want to pick up this printer for yourself, I'm going to have some links in the description. Check it out. And also, if you like videos like this, I got a lot more 3D printing stuff coming. And also check out the 3D printing playlist that I have, which has grown to be quite large. All right, guys. Well, thanks for your support and watching, and I hope to see you on the next one. Peace.